It's happening in cities across the country. Once bustling houses of worship suddenly gone quiet.
For years, the question went unasked. Churches were expanding. Parking lots were full. New campuses opened every year. Budgets grew. Attendance charts climbed. By every visible measure, American Christianity appeared strong. And yet, something was already disappearing. Not suddenly, not loudly, but steadily. Between 2010 and 2024, more than 40 million Americans stopped attending church. Not drifting, not missing a few Sundays, leaving entirely. At first, the numbers didn't alarm anyone. Churches still looked full. Growth masked loss. New visitors replaced those who slipped away. The system absorbed the damage without changing its shape. Until it couldn't. Buildings that once held thousands now sit empty. Others have been repurposed: gyms, storage facilities, office spaces. The transition happened quietly, often without headlines. A closure notice here, a merger there, a final service followed by silence. What makes this moment different from every other religious decline in American history is who left. These were not outsiders, they were insiders. They taught Sunday school, they ran children's programs, they hosted small groups in their homes. They arrived early, stayed late, and gave faithfully. Many structured their entire social lives around church community. And then they stopped coming. Not because they lost belief overnight, not because they joined another religion. Surveys show most didn't become atheists. Many still describe themselves as Christians. They simply concluded that the church itself no longer made sense. That conclusion didn't come from one scandal or one cultural shift. It came from something deeper, something structural that only became visible once millions were already gone. And by the time leaders noticed the empty seats, the cause was already years in the past. To understand what collapsed, you have to understand what was built. The modern megachurch did not emerge by accident. It was a response. By the late 1970s, many American churches were struggling. Attendance was flat. Services felt formal. Hymns felt distant. Sermons assumed biblical knowledge fewer people had. For many, church felt outdated, disconnected from daily life. The new model promised something different. In the 1980s, churches began removing friction. Sanctuaries became auditoriums. Hymns gave way to professional music that sounded like the radio. Sermons shifted from dense theology to practical advice: marriage, finances, stress, purpose. Childcare became a priority. Lobbies added coffee. Services were timed, polished, predictable. It worked. Churches like Willow Creek outside Chicago and Saddleback in Southern California grew from small gatherings into institutions, drawing tens of thousands every week. By the early 2000s, the formula was clear and widely copied. Be accessible, be relevant, be excellent. By the mid-2000s, the United States had roughly 1,600 megachurches, each averaging more than 2,000 weekly attendees. Many operated multiple campuses across entire metro areas. Annual budgets reached $10 to $20 million. Staffs numbered in the dozens, sometimes over 100. These were not just churches, they were organizations. They became the most visible expression of American Christianity. Seminaries studied them, pastors visited them, denominations encouraged churches to emulate them. Growth was treated as confirmation. Attendance was interpreted as faithfulness. Expansion was seen as proof the model worked. Very few stopped to ask a harder question. What happens when growth stops? Because embedded inside this success was an assumption so basic it went unnoticed, an assumption the entire structure depended on. And once it failed, everything built on top of it followed. By the early 2000s, the model had reached its peak. Megachurches weren't just growing, they were defining success. Attendance numbers became the clearest signal of health. Expansion meant blessing. New campuses meant momentum. Full parking lots meant the mission was working. Behind the scenes, the infrastructure expanded to match the vision.
A church drawing 5,000 people didn't function like a congregation. It functioned like a mid-sized company. Dozens of full-time staff, specialized departments, media teams, human resources, finance offices, layers of management. The buildings grew larger. Mortgage payments stretched into the millions. Technology became essential. Lighting systems, sound systems, live stream equipment. Every Sunday required coordination, rehearsal, and flawless execution. None of this was temporary. These were fixed costs. Salaries had to be paid every month. Loans had to be serviced. Utilities, insurance, maintenance, none of it paused if attendance dipped. The system assumed consistency. More than that, it assumed perpetual growth. As long as new people kept coming, the math worked. Losses were invisible because gains replaced them. Churches could afford to build first and trust attendance to catch up later. And for a time, it did. But every organization has a ceiling. Geography limits reach, demographics shift, markets saturate. Growth slows, not dramatically, just quietly. At first, no one panicked. Attendance flattened. Giving plateaued. Leadership adjusted projections and waited for the next surge. What they didn't see was that the model had no plan for stability, only expansion. And when growth stopped being automatic, the entire structure became fragile. The first visible crack wasn't financial, it was demographic. The megachurch model had grown by attracting baby boomers and early Generation X, people who wanted church to feel practical, informal, and useful. They welcomed the polish. They appreciated the efficiency. They liked that faith fit neatly into busy lives. Their children did not. Millennials and Gen Z, many of whom grew up inside megachurches, experienced the same environment differently. What their parents saw as excellence, they saw as performance. What felt welcoming to one generation felt manufactured to the next. Surveys of young adults raised in megachurches reveal a consistent pattern. They didn't leave because of one sermon or one controversy. They left because the experience felt thin. Worship felt staged, not participatory. Sermons felt motivational, not grounded in Scripture. Community felt organized, but not deeply relational. Many described the same tension. Church talked about authenticity, but everything felt curated. Leaders spoke about depth, but avoided complexity. Hard questions were postponed. Doubt was managed, not explored. By their late teens and early 20s, attendance became optional, and once it stopped being required, it stopped altogether. What makes this loss permanent is that most did not return later in life. Previous generations often drifted in young adulthood and came back with families. This generation didn't. The churches noticed the absence slowly. Youth programs shrank. Young adult ministries struggled. Volunteer pipelines thinned. By the time leaders realized a generation was missing, it was already gone. As younger generations drifted away, another weakness was forming beneath the surface. The megachurch model had been built on accessibility. Remove barriers, reduce friction, make belief easy to enter and easy to stay in. Over time, that priority reshaped the message itself. Sermons focused on improvement, better habits, healthier relationships, reduced stress. Scripture appeared, but often as support for a practical takeaway. Doctrine was simplified, complexity was avoided, discomfort was minimized. The result was a faith that felt good but knew little. Pastors later described the same realization. Congregations could explain how church made them feel, but not what they believed or why. Faith had become emotional attachment rather than conviction. This mattered when circumstances changed.
When suffering arrived, illness, loss, doubt, cultural pressure, many discovered they had no framework to endure it. The church had prepared them for success, not resilience. At the same time, leadership structures narrowed. Most megachurches were built around a single figure. The senior pastor wasn't just a teacher, he was the voice, the vision, the brand. Attendance rose or fell with his presence, trust concentrated at the top. This created momentum, but also dependency. When pastors retired, burned out, or fell into scandal, the damage spread quickly. Data shows that nearly 74% of megachurch closures occurred within 5 years of a senior pastor transition.